What's happening, you filthy casuals? It's your boy, Mr. Hardcore MMA, Jack Slack. And we're coming at you on Monday morning, because that's the time we're doing the podcast at the moment. And I thought, worked so well last week, I'll do it again this week. Lots to talk about. Well, not lots to talk about. 2 events to talk about, but they were bleh. But we'll get into that in a minute. Let's do some news. First piece of news, a little bit of an uplifting one. Ronda Rousey turned up at the Royal Rumble. Obviously, she's going to get paid a lot of money to do that, which is nice, because she's found a career that she can move into now that everyone in MMA seems to hate her. The responses to this were just amazing on Twitter. People being like, well, she could win in that fake sport because she was blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no, she was the best in the world for quite a while. But that's people. They just love a good hate train. But she turned up to challenge, was it Asuka or Charlotte or someone? I don't know. But they shelled out for bad reputation, which, if you know anything about the WWE, they don't like doing. That was CM Punk's famous getting one over on Vince when he re-signed his contract and got Cult of Personality as his theme, as opposed to some Jim Johnson stuff. And they gave her the Rowdy Ronda Rousey in the hot rod Roddy Piper style font. And she was wearing a massive leather jacket that was all stretched out around the forearms and didn't fit. And it turned out that was because it was Roddy Piper's jacket and his son had asked her to wear it. And yeah, apparently Roddy Piper was a big Rousey fan. So that's quite cool, I thought, generally. Yeah, can't complain at all, you know. Let the woman make a living. If people still want to buy into Rousey Mania, and it clearly isn't a thing when she's fighting the best fighters in the world, let her wrestle. The better news is that we get Shinsuke Nakamura versus AJ Styles at WrestleMania, and that will tear the house down. If they do it like they did at Wrestle Kingdom a few years ago, as opposed to Shinsuke Nax, who turns up and doesn't really bother. Other news, Paige Van Zandt announced that she's engaged. I don't know, will that make it into the book? Have they left enough time? Did they plan this in advance and tell the person ghostwriting the book, did they plan this in advance and did Paige write it into the book? But yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that turns. Actually, no, it won't. That's not interesting at all. I'm not even going to pretend. Jacare versus Brunson draws the lowest overnight rating of any UFC on Fox card ever. Not really surprising when you consider the names on it, or lack of names on it. But we'll get into that in a moment when we're reviewing the card. And Bellator 192, which was Chael versus Rampage, drew 1.3 million viewers for the main event. So there you go. When people were complaining the other week about putting them on last, clearly it worked because Rubes tuned in. Even though even the people in the arena thought it was a dreadful fight. But more interesting news. Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier has been signed. Supposedly they are coaching one of the series of The Ultimate Fighter. What are we on now? 50-something? And they'll be fighting at UFC 226. Or I don't know why I said that like that. 226 or 226. And that's a really good fight. And this comes on the heels of last week them saying, nah, that's never ever going to happen. And DC being like, nah, I can't do it because of Kane. Kane came out and gave the fight his blessing and then was like, but I will have to take that belt off Daniel if he wins. And we were all just like, nah, you're never getting healthy again for more than one fight, mate. But Stipe versus Cormier is a good matchup. I really like that. Cormier, I always thought he looked a lot smoother on the feet at heavyweight, even though clearly he's gotten... Well, not so much in his last fight, but against Jones he was looking much sharper on the feet the second time around. But I thought his hands always looked very fast at heavyweight because, well, partly because he was fighting guys like Bigfoot Silva who just had no idea how to keep up with him. You can bet you could bet the house on Stipe's team working on the left high kick now, because the way that Cormier leans down to the side in answer to punches, the way that he stretches his arms out and does all that. A guy like Stipe who feints the jab constantly to draw reactions, he's going to be looking to drop the right hand, but generally Cormier has been all right at avoiding those. So I'd be looking to jab him into the left high kick a la Peter Aerts, or just low kicking works really well against Daniel Cormier. Josh Barnett did a great job low kicking and body kicking. Daniel Cormier hates being hit in the body, but if you watch any of his fights at heavyweight where a guy hit him in the body, he jumps backwards. He's like really not into that. But I don't think I've ever seen Stipe hit the body much. So I wouldn't Well, with the exception of that Struve fight. But again, you're talking about a height disparity in the other direction now. It's not easy to get in on DC's midriff with punches. Maybe knees from the clinch, but then again, clinch is probably an area you want to avoid as it's DC's greatest strength. For DC, we'll get into this on another day. This is just like very preliminary stuff. Fight might not even come to fruition yet. With the best fights on The Ultimate Fighter, or the best fights where the coaches are to match each other at the end of the season, they always fall through. That's just the way it is. Someone will get injured during it. Like Lesnar versus Dos Santos. God, that would have been great. But no, never got it. And Carwin versus Nelson. Oh. Though that could end up headlining a Bellator sometime soon. Much like Rashad versus Rampage, who ran into each other at the club, even though they're friends and it was clearly staged, but people were still online going, "Oh my god!" Like they didn't remember how much talk there was before the first fight, and that the first fight really wasn't that great, and that both these guys are beyond washed up now. In Bellator-related news, Brent Primus and Michael Chandler are targeted for April, whatever Bellator event that is, mid-April. This one's super contentious because there are genuinely people who are like, Brent Primus planned to have the Chandler's ankle collapse when he tapped the outside of his calf. Unfortunate, but again, what are you going to do? And Chandler almost knocked him out while on one leg, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And finally, Roy Jones Jr.'s retirement fight is apparently going to be aired on Fight Pass, and I think that's quite nice. I mean, Roy Jones Jr., I think he's retired twice before now, but, if it's a real retirement, well, actually, we won't know until afterwards if it's a real retirement, but I'd be up for watching it, especially as it's on Fight Pass. I'd be up for watching old Roy Jones fight scrubs, to be honest, because it's quite enjoyable. But, you'd have to seek him out afterwards on YouTube. Whereas on Fight Pass, I could watch it live, unless I have to pay for it, then, fuck that. Anyway, let's do some recaps. So your boy did the alternative MMA fan thing and actually watched the Bellator fights the other night. No, I'm trying to keep up with Bellator more now. I'm trying to keep up with everything more, in part of my commitment to get a better grasp of who's up and coming in the world of MMA. Wanted to watch ONE FC, but then just could not be arsed. But I did watch Bellator, and what I'm always finding with Bellator is that the difference between the main and co-main and the rest of the card is astonishing in terms of level of the fighters. Unless it's like an old man fight headlining, and then the co-main event is just better than everything. I can't remember what the last one that I really watched the whole card on was. I think it was the one with Baby Slice on the main card. It was just dreck. But yeah, I watched this one, and what did I get? I got Jake Smith versus Steve Cavazzola. Yeah, well, that was a very quick knockout. Bit sloppy on both sides, but then I watched AJ Matthews snap his four-fight losing streak to beat Kendall Grove, which, I just got bored in the middle of that one. And then Sadawad versus JJ Ambrose, you could actually tell that those lads had something. They look like decent. Is Sadawad getting a bit... Is Syed Awad getting a bit old to be a prospect now? I don't know. But they both looked like they knew what they were doing, and it was a good fun scrap. Lots of snap downs to front headlocks and things like that from Ambrose, but just getting outworked by Awad. And again, another one of those fights where things were very obviously changed by the first 3 or 4 low kicks that landed on the back of the calf, or the side of the calf or whatever. And then Ambrose had to start doing something about them once he was already limping. Not a great start to the fight for him. You really need to see guys retracting that lead leg now, because you got to punish the guy for throwing hard kicks towards your leg with no setup. And the only way to do that is step in, which is a little bit harder when they're kicking lower, with the right hand, or to retract the leg and immediately throw up like a high kick or a kick into the open side, or to just chase them down while they're on one leg. And then the main event was Lorenz Larkin versus Fernando, once won 7 fights in a row, Gonzalez. I mean, I enjoy Lorenz Larkin. You know that Lorenz Larkin's one of my boys. I did a boy watch on him, which you should definitely watch on the YouTube channel. And some of the stuff from that was on show. We got a nice new way to land the Larkin stomp, that nice push kick with the heel that he brings up to the side first, like it's going to, just to simulate, or rather, just to trigger the opponent thinking that something's coming in from the side, normally that right low kick. But he was doing it in the second round when Gonzalez came forward, started pursuing him. He circled one way, circled the other, brought his lead foot back into his stance like he was about to circle off into a side skip, and then threw up the straight kick into the abdomen, which I really liked. A few nice flurries led by the right-hand lead. That's a Larkin staple, really. Right-hand lead into left hook into right hand again. And it generally works quite well off that cross hand trap. If you can get them withdrawing that lead hand tight into their guard, he can shoot the right down the centre and sometimes catch him off guard, or at least with the follow-ups catch them. Last round, lovely Naihanchi elbow, the single collar tie over the top. I feel like it's probably a bit different in MMA, because in Muay Thai, obviously, you have to deal with that position all the time, and people trying to elbow you while they have one grip on you. But in MMA, there's a lot more having to worry about the guy dropping in and trying to get on your hips or into a clinch proper. Guys are framing with that elbow and stuff, and they don't bring it up when you start elbowing them in the head, which is what happened, and Gonzalez just ate numerous elbows to the head just before the final bell. And then, during the the decisions, while they were reading them out, he was miming to the camera that he'd won 2 rounds and Larkin had won 1 and he should win. And you're going, no, which rounds did you think you won? Well, I presume 1 and 2, not the third one, but he didn't win shit. So, decent showing out of Larkin. What would I like to see him do next? I was saying this on Twitter the other day, but I think it would be a really good move for Bellator to get MVP back and have him fight Larkin. Because obviously the daily fight's not happening, and people have just been burned too many times with that now. Well, certainly sensible people have. But getting back to fight Larkin, because Larkin, if the daily fight showed anything, it's that you can catch him sleeping with some weird shit, And that's the sort of thing that would really help Michael Page, because he could maybe catch a weird spinning something or a kick out of nowhere. But that's a fight that Lorenz Larkin could probably win quite easily. Well, not easily, because it's never easy with Larkin. He fights the same fight no matter who he's fighting, it seems. But Lorenz Larkin, not a great finisher, not a guy who really puts the pace on guys and pushes his advantages, really just likes to pick at guys and put on little bursts. And that's the sort of guy that's not going to completely embarrass or blow out MVP, hopefully. So you get Larkin a win. He's got 2 in a row over guys who are fairly recognisable. If you're a Bellator fan, they're recognisable. And if you are someone who follows MMA on Reddit or anything like that, you know who Michael Venom Page is, because you've seen so many highlight reel clips of him. So then you can move Larkin into a title shot at Rory McDonald. So there you've got your next welterweight title match set up. If Larkin loses by chance to MVP suddenly has a massive name on his record, and you can say, okay, cool, let's move him up. We'll have him fight Rory or fight someone else, but at least you're doing something with him. And if it's true that he did get bored of not being moved along before he went to boxing, which would be weird because he's now fighting even scrubbier scrubs in boxing, but if that's the reason why, as he claims it is, then you've given him a tougher fight without risking him being absolutely humiliated. But that seems far too sensible. I expect we'll get Larkin versus... who's that lad that Daly starched with a flying knee? Brennan Ward? No. I forget his name. But we'll probably get that, and then MVP will come back to fight a bin man of some kind. And then, of course, there were the best part of 10 post-limb fights. One of them, Everett Cummins, advances to 14-0, fighting the 7-4 Ben Bibe. Well, you know what's going on there. But the reason that Bellator just stocks these cards up with dozens and dozens of people is so that they have enough followers that they can sell out the arena. And this one looked to be held at a sports centre somewhere. So not a great card. Lorenz Larkin was the only really good thing on it. But I watched it, so there you go. Had to talk about it because I wasted my time with it. Time to brew some tea. But before I do, I'm going to plug everything. The Patreon episode on the Pride Middleweight Grand Prix is about to be released. If you are not a Patreon boy, consider signing up to Patreon. We are now we're trying for 2 episodes a week. And I'm trying to get my first one out earlier so that we can reflect on the fights without them, without forgetting about them before we have to talk about them again. And the history lectures are generally very well received. We've also got like 10 or 11 up now that you can go and listen to. If you haven't bought the book, consider buying the book, Notorious. If you haven't bought Finding the Art, that's still up there and it's brilliant. It's my favourite thing I wrote. And if you haven't bookmarked thefightprimer.com, the new prospect watch on a light heavyweight. I know, Jesus, there are actually light heavyweight prospects. There's a new prospect watch coming out Tuesday. Right, cup of tea, back in a second. I'm back with tea, and I actually had to stop recording because the bin lorry pulled up outside my window and sat there for about 10 minutes. They must have been heard what I'm saying about Michael Page, and thought maybe they could go through me to be his next opponent. But so now I'm back, and my tea's a little bit colder than it would have been. But we're going to do that UFC event that was actually pretty decent in a very low key. Actually, it was hit and miss like all events, but there was some decent stuff on it, like Gillespie and Jacare, and I'll remember some when we get there. But so, let's talk about UFC on Fox 27, Jacare versus Brunson 2. This was in North Carolina at the Speculum Center. And what was good, Corey Sandhagen, if you knock it, someone was on my Facebook before this fight going, Corey Sandhagen, look out for him, Jack. And then moments after this body shot knockout happened, he wrote, Corey Sandhagen. So props to that guy, because I did check him out before the fight. And I was like, oh. And then he came in and just knocked this dude cold with it. Well, not cold, but in agony with a body shot in round 2. So yeah, I was pretty impressed with him. Looked good. Anyone who's going to the body and is a prospect, straight on my list, because it used to be like you would occasionally see the best striker in MMA, Anderson Silva, land a body shot, and that was it. Like, or Takanori Gomi would do them, and everyone would go, "God, that's revolutionary." Now they're actually coming out at the lower levels of the guys on the big cards, which is nice, especially since in MMA, if you're there at the big show, you're tough as fuck anyway. So why bother hitting people in the head as hard as you can when you can make them curl up in a ball, no matter how much heart they have? That's the wonderful thing about the body shot. Even the toughest men in the world can be made to go fetal if they get hit while they're breathing in or just at the wrong time. Nico Price versus George Sullivan. Pretty good. Vink Pichel? It was Pichel where they said it, and Joaquim Silva. I sort of drifted in and out during that one. And then there were these 3 women's fights in a row, which, if I wanted to turn someone off women's MMA for life, I'd just show him these. Ji Yoon Kim versus Justine Kish. Good on Kish. I always root for her because of that incident against Felice Herrig when she literally shat in the octagon, which is a terribly embarrassing thing to happen, so power to her, and she took it really well at the time. She was just like, happens. Randa Marcos, who I do quite like, against Juliana Lima, who I also quite like, but that fight was just dull. And then Katlyn Chikagian versus Mara Ramiro Barella. This was everything I hate about Holly Holm, basically. Chikagian, they say she's a kickboxer, and I'm like, oh, a tall kickboxer against a shorter fighter. This will be interesting. Then she comes out and throws strikes at air for the entirety of the contest. Nothing happened. This one I actually caught up on afterwards, having seen Jonathan Snowden say that it was unironically the worst fight he'd ever seen, like not even exaggerating. And I was like, you're talking shit. And then I checked it out, and I actually might agree with him, because at least Caleb Starnes, you were getting a laugh out of the fight. This was just dreadful. Throwing strikes from way out of range, kiai on every strike. And I put this up on my Facebook, and I said, can we ban the kiai? Because it's just awful. But I was specifically referring to this and Holly Holm. And, people who are just making noise to seem like they're doing something when they're not. And it actually started an argument about white privilege. It was absolutely fucking bizarre. This guy comes in and is like, oh, you white boys, so white privilege, blah, blah, blah. And then eat a dick, faggots, or whatever. And you're like, well, surely, if you're offended about one thing, don't be a total cunt about the other thing. But, that's people on the internet. Chikagian, I counted it this morning. I was like, fuck it, I'll count it. I watched the first round. I wanted to watch the whole fight, but I got so bored. The first round, I counted 102 kiais. and she connected less than 20 strikes. It's not even like, because people immediately, if you say anything about kiais, someone from a background in martial arts will come in and go, actually, I think you'll find it's proven to increase power. And I'm not disputing that. Like, there's tons of stuff to be looked into in like intra-abdominal pressure and, the Valsalva movement and all those sort of things are very interesting, and they've been looked into extensively by people in weight training and various other disciplines. But it's like chi, if it's there, it's not going to make a big enough difference to a fist fight as actually being able to fist fight will. It's like people who spend 10 years working on their kiai, and you're like, but you could have learned to box in that time. It's not going to help you in a fight. Unless, of course, the judges see it and go, oh, she's making noise, she must have won. So that's how Jacare won anyway. But, I understand that you can hit harder if you're grunting. Like, Prince Nazim used to be like, rah, rah, all the time. But he was actually trying to hit people. Whereas we noticed this with Jacare and Holly Holm, they are making noise while pumping feints. Like, they're not even trying. Or pumping triple jabs with no intention of getting near the target and then getting countered afterwards. Just the worst striking masquerading as passable striking that I've ever seen in the UFC. No, I'll say in recent years. The bin men just circled round again. It's getting a bit creepy now. But, probably the worst in recent years. And I'm not including, like, Cindy Dandois. I mean, like, if people saw it, they go, oh, the technique looks all right, but she wasn't accomplishing anything. Drew Dober versus Frank Camacho, I really enjoyed this fight. Did it win Fight of the Night? I think it probably should have won Fight of the Night. Camacho, in the opening round, I was like, shit, this lad's going to give Drew Dober a long night. He was slipping the left hand, because Dober's the southpaw. One of them was south. I think it's Dober's the southpaw. He's slipping the left straights, coming back with the right uppercut to the solar plexus. Like, really underrated punch. Uppercut to the solar plexus. You don't see it very much, even though it's one that everyone knows exists. And they always do it in, like, films. They go, ruh, with the uppercut to the solar plexus. But you don't see it in fights too often. Floyd Mayweather against Maidana the second time, he hid some really nice bodywork in just shoulder rolling into the right uppercut to the solar plexus, and it really slowed Maidana down. But Camacho was landing nice counters off the shoulder roll and the slip, and as I was watching this, they were talking about his golf career, and I was like, golf, good base for MMA, I've decided, based on this performance so far. And he hit some beautiful judo sweeps or trips or whatever you want to call it. I think it's Sasai Surikomi Ashi. I believe that's the one because it's my favourite. It's the Agaev sweep, as I like to call it. Basically, you're turning the opponent so that they have to step, and then your foot is blocking their foot from stepping. Any trip, really. And a lot of foot sweeps, unless you're actually lifting the foot off the ground, a lot of trips are just, well, all trips really, are just move the opponent's centre of gravity past their foot, and then when they need to step, you just block the step. That's one thing that you can say about all trips, and if you go and look through the trips, various tripping techniques of wrestling and judo, you can make that as a solid, that's pretty much what defines a trip rather than a throw or a takedown. Though they are all grouped as takedowns now on like scorecards and shit, or on, Fight Metric. But we use that as a generic term. Takedown typically used to mean like taking the man down with you. But anyway, we're doing semantics and we don't need to. But yeah, Camacho looked really good, I thought, for the first round. And then he's just put, like, Dober pushed him a little bit in the second round and they were working at a good pace. And within a minute, Camacho's mouth is open and he's just completely static. It was absolutely bizarre. He's quite an experienced fighter, so I'm probably not an adrenaline dump, but he hit his threshold and it was really obvious. Yeah, I mean, he's been in the UFC for 2 fights already, so yeah, he's not, like, inexperienced at all, and he went to the decision both times, but I was just very surprised how quickly that hit him. You normally see guys slowing, and he just went straight off a cliff. And then Dober put it on him, landed some lovely body shots, and just a great all-round scrap. I mean, if you didn't watch the card and you're just waiting to see what you should watch, I would definitely recommend that fight. And Camacho, he looked so sharp technically. I've definitely got an eye on him in future. I'm looking at his record in the UFC now, and it's a bit checkered. I think he's lost 2 and won 1, and they all went to the distance. But that's a lad who, if he can get it together, and probably get some better strength and conditioning well, not coaches, but a better strength and conditioning program behind him, I think he could definitely put guys away with the shots that he was landing. If he could push the pace after them, if instead of landing that one good counter, he landed a counter combination, it's just pushing that little bit further, because he's getting all the openings and he's creating the counters and he's creating the takedowns. He's just not really following up on them. Like when he got the takedowns, he'd rest a little bit and then he'd start moving and things like that. And those are the sort of things where, you know, you watch, obviously different division, but you watch Yoel Romero, if he gets an inch, he's taking a mile. And, you know, he does rest for the rest of the round, but there's a lot to be said for just following up before your man catches up with what's happening to him. But it's very tiring, obviously. So that's the sort of thing that will take some time to get into him. But I reckon he could be a good finisher, some of the shots he was landing. Oh, I've skipped over a couple here. Mirsad Bektik, lovely right hand to the ball. Actually, not lovely in terms of like it was that Korean Superboy overhand straight thing with the elbow up in the air. But he hit Gianfrido Pepe in the body and set him down. I thought Pepe was looking pretty good up till then. I remembered Pepe as like a janky-ass striker. I thought he looked all right in this fight for the moments that it was on. Then Bobby Green versus Eric Koch, or Koch, whatever you want to call him. Koch. First round was a little bit slow, but Bobby Green, his shoulder rolls were looking good, and he was actually countering off them, and I was like, that's pretty good. He is a guy with a skill set that he refuses to use a lot of the time, and I think he probably learned from all these losses now that he needs to step up the action and make stuff happen. As we said in our preview of this, that was literally the garbage truck again. That's so fucking weird. Anyway, as we said in our preview in episode 66, which was our late week one last week, the shoulder roll is a way of life. No, it's a technique or a strategy or a tactic that you have to make the most of your opportunities. If you're catching the opponent's gloves off your shoulder, and it means you're in position to counterpunch. It's a thing where them hitting your shoulder triggers your right hand going back at them, and then you put together a combination if you feel like it, or you just get back on safety and fight conservative, a la Floyd Mayweather. But if you just keep shoulder rolling blows and you're not doing anything back, then you're just inviting more blows, and you're just going to get beat up, which is what happened in a lot of Bobby Green's fights. You know, he can dust off his shoulders and mean mug all he wants, but if you're under fire the entire time and you're not firing back and landing, you fucked up. So he wins the decision, hopefully a fresh start for Bobby Green, and we can all get back to being excited about his potential. Just a detour of a couple of years in the middle where he wasn't very good. Gregor Gillespie beats Jordan Rinaldi. Really good fight. I mean, I like Gregor Gillespie quite a lot. Sort of overlooked him coming into this card. You know, it's weird. You look down these cards and you're like, I don't recognise many of those names. And then you're like, oh yeah, he fought that massive dude in a real barn burner. And in that fight, he showed some pretty good striking for what he was advertised as a wrestler. This one, he went to his wrestling a bit more, gave him the old butterface finish, pounded him from behind. First round TKO with 15 seconds left. So I'm impressed. And then he seemed like a decent guy on the microphone. So I was like, oh, that's your earning potential capped, but I do like you, so well done. Co-main event was the contentious one. You know, people are arguing about this. I don't think Dennis Bermudez deserved all 3 rounds, because that was what people were arguing about. A judge gave him 3 rounds, and some people were like, well, that's perfectly reasonable. He did win all 3 rounds. I'd have given them all 10-8. And I thought Andre Fili did a great job in this fight. His jab looked good. He used the uppercut nicely to raise Bermudez up out of his stance and then shoot in on him and land those quick takedowns. Didn't really do anything with them, which is always like a bummer, but for some fights that seems to matter, and for other fights it doesn't. You know, like, we score... Well, I don't think Camacho did much with his takedowns, but they scored, you know, so, yeah. No, I thought that was a good look out of Fili. He's a guy who's sort of... he's had a literally checkered record, because he has 1-1, lost 1, 1-1, lost 1. This is his first time getting 2 wins back-to-back in the UFC. I think the fact that whether you thought he won or lost, it was close, and he was fighting a perennial top 15 guy. Wasn't super impressed with Bermudez, you know, his like triple jabbing with his face straight there for Fili to hit. But he did grit it out and really recovered from a slow start. And then the main event was Brunson versus Ronaldo Souza, and you may have noticed that I didn't write anything about this week. I hate watching Derek Brunson fight. I mean, he might be an awesome guy, and he provides exciting knockouts, but I really don't like watching him because his striking is comical. Like, you won't see anyone in any combat sport at a high level strike that badly. You know, the chin literally up in the air. I've never seen... Never. Like, the only times I've seen it are when, in those old, like, YouTube videos of boxers in the 90s, where a boxer takes on a street fighter with, like, an undefeated record, and he's developed his own style of boxing, and then he comes out and he's just, like, chin up in the air, waving. I cannot believe that he works with the team that he does and the coaches that he does and still does this. And then you see him in, like, the countdown videos, shadowboxing with a tennis ball under his chin, you know, like the classic training to keep your chin to the chest. But he still just runs in, chin up, swinging like a bum every single time. And Jacare caught him with the same counter that he knocked him out with in the first fight. Caught him with it like half a dozen times before the head kick. This guy just cannot strike at all. Still good to see Jacare get back on track. He was very tearful in the cage afterwards. Didn't see anything that would make me think that he could beat Bobby Whittaker, but then I don't think anyone can beat Bobby Whittaker because he's the best. Found out the other day that his staph was really bad, like internal organ staph. That is the scariest thing that still happens in MMA. And to be honest, like, anytime I hear about a guy getting really bad staph, it really puts me off training for like a day or two, because, you know, I'm on the mats most days, and I just think, God, that's, you know, there but for the grace of God go I. I mean, obviously, some people say, like, steroids and performance-enhancing drugs lower your immunities to staph, and that is maybe why it's a bigger problem in MMA. But I've been watching more, like I said, I was watching a load of Pride stuff, but I've really been noticing a lot of, like, obvious staph marks on guys in the Japanese scene. It's pretty bad. But anyway, that was the Jacare versus Brunson card. Like I said, not as bad as I expected. If it wasn't for those three women's fights in the middle that really just bummed out the whole card, but then they were on the prelims. You know, once you got to the main card, you got Dober versus Camacho, which was great. Gregor Gillespie versus Jordan Rinaldi, which was great. Andre Fili versus Bermudez, which was good. And then Souza versus Brunson, which was quick and finished with a knockout. So not bad all around. Right, let's do some questions before we get out of here for Monday's podcast, and then we'll come back and do some previews later in the week. Hi Jack. First of all, thanks for all the work you put into your articles and work in general. My question is similar to something that you have discussed on the podcast before, which is how to deal with range. When I spar, brackets, kickboxing, I often find myself outside of longer, more powerful opponents. I try to use things such as feints and circling to try to mitigate this. However, when I do try to come forward, I get hit with teeps or stiff-armed. Is this a case of me needing to work on more angles to avoid this? Also, bonus points if you can come up with anything to deal with the stiff-arm defense for orthodox versus southpaws, as I am a lefty. Cheers, from Sam. Yes, the general rule with dealing with a range disparity, if you are the shorter man, is that you can... Well, you must always remember that you can deal with it two ways. You can go to the opponent, which is the most obvious one, or you can make them come to you and then step in on them when they step in, which can often prove more effective because it is counterintuitive. It also means that it's harder to do because it feels very strange as the smaller man saying, "Come to me." But, for an example in the kickboxing world, or rather the Muay Thai world, Saenchai is often giving up huge amounts of height and weight to his opponents, and he does a lot of his best work waiting for the opponent on the end of their range, and then they'll throw a kick at him or something like that, and he'll catch it and come in off it, like Buakar style leg drag across the body. Catching kicks generally a great idea, or he'll pull the lead leg away if they kick at his leg and come back with kicks of his own, or he'll pull his head away and come back with kicks of his own. It's getting guys to reach at him, and then he'll move in on them while they're recovering from a missed kick. And when he wants to go in on his own terms, you'll notice that he often comes in behind the lead leg, raising it up as if to teep. I'm glad you said you're southpaw, actually, because when I was reading that question, I was thinking, how can I make this Saenchai example apply to an orthodox fighter, but as you're a southpaw, you can literally just watch Saenchai. His, I think Lawrence Kenshin called it a scissor kick, but that, I often refer to them as bicycle kicks and things like that, but that lead leg coming up, that lead knee coming up, it can obstruct the body, help you make a little wedge so that you can get in, and any teep or anything like that will get sort of jammed on you as you move in, or glance off you. And then you can follow up with a nice kick afterwards off the other side. And then you can build that into like jumping pedalo style kicks and things like that. But raising the lead knee and falling in behind it is always a good one. It works just as well with the skip up outside low kick. Not a very powerful kick, but if you use it to the lower leg as an opponent retreats, you can knock them off balance slightly and hold them in place for your follow up. But yeah, I'd say I definitely advise you just watch a lot of Saenchai and watch what he does from longer ranges, because a lot of it is like kick me, lean out of the way, and then he kicks back, or kick me, catch the kick, then he comes in with either a foot sweep or steps in behind the leg and starts punching or kicking. Stiff arms. Stiff arming is great in certain contexts. If you're being stiff armed on the face, a la Holm Rousey, move your head. That's the first thing. If you're being stiff-armed on the shoulder, that's a little bit more complex. But with longer opponents, that sort of over-the-shoulder leverage guard thing gets a little bit more risky, or rather with taller opponents, because they're reaching down to press your shoulder, which makes it a lot harder for them to consciously, or rather unconsciously, keep the shoulder up. They'll have to be thinking about keeping that shoulder up. So if you're dealing with the stiff arm, I just remembered you're a southpaw. But I was going to say, if you're dealing with the stiff arm, the inside parry is a fantastic one from there, because the inside parry is such a powerful technique anyway. It's one you see Stipe Miocic using. It was Vladimir Klitschko's bread and butter. Its lead hand goes inside the opponent's lead hand, pulls it forwards, and the right hand shoots down the line that was occupied by the lead hand. And it's so powerful. But, a lot of the time you're trying to time it against jabs, which is quite tricky. Works well if the guy has a very lazy stance with his lead hand out there. What you'll see guys like Vladdy doing is putting their lead hand across the opponent's lead hand to try and draw it forward, and then he'll whip that lead hand round to the other side to strip it from the inside. There's a few ways to get that hand out there. But if the guy's hand is already on you, all you need to do is knock it out of the way and fire over the top with an overhand or a arcing right straight or something like that. I would play with hand traps, would be my advice for dealing with stiff arms, because they are giving you something to work with. The thing with hand traps is that it often doesn't work if the opponent keeps their guard very tight. The other one is that anytime someone's arm is straight out, even if they're keeping their shoulders up and they're beautifully protecting their head, their ribs are still open. The elbows are what protect the ribs. So if they're still in range and you can keep pushing in on them and you can knock that arm out of the way, or you can duck under it or something like that, bang the body. In fact, even if you may be able, if it's a stiff arm, you might be able to get in the kick unless you've got a real height disparity. So all sorts of things that you can try there. When God closes a door, he opens a window and all that. Or rather, when someone stiff arms you, they open themselves up a bit. Jack, in real life training videos of people online, you always see them doing 10 fast kicks where literally anything other than the first kick is awful. Is there still a benefit to this despite lack of technique, or is it worth just getting the speed? Also, is there a certain training day-to-day that you would suggest that helped you or people you have studied? Thank you. Plus, going back to last week's podcast, if you did one just after the event and one midweek, I'm sure people would tune in, unless it's a pain in the bollocks to do it twice a week. Cheers, Dylan. Yeah, I'm going to try it. We'll see if it works. Re-kicking multiple times, I'm assuming you could mean two things here. You could mean like the Thai style of 10 kicks off one side. You very rarely see guys throw even a double up kick. In Muay Thai, it's a lot more common. Like at the high levels, you'll see guys double up with the same leg because they're happy to just pound anything. But generally, it's a conditioning exercise and a speed exercise. Muay Thai fighters typically, or well-trained Thai fighters and kickboxers, you'll notice them get back to their stance a lot better between repetitions, or after repetitions. A lot of it is conditioning, though. That's a very traditional Thai thing to do, like do 100 kicks or 100 knees on the bag, and it's a killer. If you're not used to it, it will murder you. And this is something that we often think about. There are basically like 4 pillars to doing anything, or to doing any martial art. One's technical, technical and tactical we'll put together, but one's technical ability, one's endurance, one's strength, and one's speed. And really, like, within speed and technique and endurance, those are all like sport specific. I mean, you can't really strength. You can build sport specific, I suppose, but you can have the best gas tank in the world, but doing your sport will gas you out, way quicker. Especially if it's something like fighting, where you're doing explosive movements all the time. It's not running or swimming or anything else that you've been using to build incredible cardio. And that's why that multiple kicking is pretty useful. If you've never, I always used to like a drill called the 10-20-10s, which is 10 kicks off one side, 20 knees, 10 kicks off the other side, and then you just rep it out as many times as possible until you vomit, which is great with a heavy bag if you've got a big floor-to-ceiling heavy bag, like Thai style, or even with the kick shield or something like that if you want to do it on the go. But the other one is like the Bill Wallace style multiple kicks from the chamber on one leg, like the thing you used to see Jean-Claude Van Damme do and all those guys in movies. And I used to laugh at that and say it was absolute bollocks, but I've seen Bill Wallace do it. So watch a Bill Wallace fight and he actually will. There's this great sparring session between Joe Louis, the kickboxer, not Joe Louis the boxer. Joe Louis and Bill Wallace. And Bill Wallace is a middleweight, Joe Louis is a heavyweight, but Bill Wallace seems light years ahead of him. And he just keeps catching him out by putting up this slow kick to the body, immediately rechambering it and kicking him in the head. And, I've seen Bill Wallace knock guys out with flicky kicks like that. So I'm more than convinced that he could do that off like his second kick off one leg. But generally, most people can't. That used to be a thing. If you turned up at a traditional martial arts tournament, guys would be leaning on the pillars or on the wall, and they'd be doing the multiple high-low-high kicks, Chun-Li shit. And you're really just kicking with your quad, and all those stabilizing muscles are firing off like mad to keep you in position to do it. It's very fatiguing and not a lot of point to it. The whole point of a kick is that you're trying to get your whole body into it and use the heaviest striking surface that you can. Any certain day-to-day training I would suggest, I've been arsing around for decades with this, I do what I like. I try and make sure that I'm doing something for cardio every day, and I try and make sure that I'm doing something where I am engaging in active resistance with someone each day. You have to fit in strength training and things like that around it. And of course, if you're going away, if you work in other towns and stuff like that, or you have to go away on business, obviously gets harder. But with the growing BJJ community, I found that there's a lot more places you can just drop in now, which is amazing. But yeah, I think you need to do something for your heart or your lungs, basically, every day. And I think you also need to try and, you're not trying to kill your opponent or anything like that. I'm not saying like hard spar every day or hard roll every day, but do something where your mind is matched against someone else every day. Would be my best example for healthy living as a martial artist or a combat sports athlete. Obviously you're going to be doing a lot more if you're getting ready to compete for something. Cheers, Dylan. Right. I reckon that'll do us for today, and we'll get back later in the week to preview Machida versus your boy, Eric Anders, who I am now well into because I found out that's his nickname. New Prospect Watch dropping tomorrow at thefightprimer.com. New Patreon lecture dropping this week. Sign up for that, there's still time. And if you have any questions, send them to fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. This has been the Fights Gone By podcast. I'm closing the blinds and hiding from the bin men for the rest of the day. Cheers.